Welcome to Mind Shift Power Podcast, a show for teenagers and the adults who work with them, where we have raw and honest conversations. I'm your host, Fatima Bey, the Mind Shifter. And welcome. In today's episode, we have a special guest. We are going to be talking about challenges for minority teens in the school systems. And it's a much bigger issue than most people probably even think about. And so today's guest here is Erica Bess. She is
Hey,
a licensed, hello, Erica. She is a licensed therapist. She has 11 plus years of experience as a social worker and a therapist. And the majority of her work has actually been working with teens in the school setting, which is why she's here. And she's the owner of Empower Therapy. So, how are you doing today, Erica?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am awesome. I'm really excited to talk to you about this because I think it's something that most people don't think about. And hopefully, today we can plant some seeds that'll grow into something profitable later.
Definitely.
So, with let's dive right in, as I always like to do. With all of your years of experience, what would you say is the biggest issues that needs to be addressed for our teens?
Biggest issue that needs to be addressed for our teens is for them to have a safe place or safe space to go and to talk with people who are not going to judge them.
Let me back up there. You said safe space. People use that term a lot. What
hmm
does that actually mean?
When I say it, I don't know what everybody else means, but when I say it, it's like when you're talking to me, you're in a place where you can say whatever you need to say without any judgment. Um, you can curse, you can holler, you can stomp your feet, and you're not going to be judged in that moment while talking to me. So when I
So
say
you
safe space, just while we're in a conversation, doesn't have to be a specific place,
right.
but you're in a safe area to talk to me about whatever.
So that means you're not going to politically correct them.
No, no, no.
I want to point out that a safe space really does not include political correction.
hmm
Not when it comes to figuring things out.
Right.
Um, so safe space. What is another big issue?
Another big issue for teens, especially I think minority teens, is that they're in school systems where it's predominantly run by white systems. And I don't think a lot of the minority teens have the comfort level to be able to go reach out to these people who are put in the schools for their counseling needs. They don't feel comfortable.
Hmm.
So I think that's a big issue too. So getting more people involved who are of the same culture or of the same background so that the teens have somebody to identify with.
I would say relatable.
Relatable for sure.
So, and I do agree. Just I don't have all of the many years of experience as you do, but in the years of experience that I do have, I have seen what you are talking about.
hmm
Um, just in general, having not having people that who are in positions of authority that we can relate to.
So
And
true.
that's not just true in the cool school systems, but I think it's easier to see and point out in the school system.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so one of the biggest issues is not being able to not have anybody to relate to. So what do you think are the repercussions of that when they don't have anybody to
Mm. When they
relate
don't
to?
have anybody to relate to, they start trying to, I guess, find it in their friends and peers, and then they start giving into peer pressure, finding out from people on the streets or maybe older relatives who are not quite adults. Like I know I used to ask my cousin, my older cousin, all types of stuff about boys that I didn't feel like my mother was going to answer, but I didn't necessarily get a good good guidance necessarily because sometimes we're asking the wrong people, some people who don't even know.
Hmm.
Yep.
Very true. I do want to point out, And I like to be raw and blunt and honest. So you have minorities in school systems that are predominantly positions of authority that they can talk to are predominantly white.
Right.
That's true in a lot of places. It's not true everywhere, but it's definitely true. And I would probably say more places than not. But are there sometimes some of those old white folks who are actually relatable? And I'm saying this because we
Sometimes
got a
they
teen
are.
audience. We have a teen audience.
Right.
And sometimes there are. And
Yeah.
I think it's important to point that out as well.
Yeah.
Talking to teens in particular right now, just because he looks like an old white man or she looks like an out of touch old white lady
Mhm.
doesn't mean
Doesn't
that
mean
she
that they
doesn't
may
mean
not be able to relate. Yeah.
oh yeah,
You
because some of them
just
been through some same stuff that you're going through and you don't know it because you
yeah.
haven't sat down and talked with them.
And give them that chance, exactly. So yeah, we have to do get past that judgment when we look at somebody and assume that they're a certain way, but have a conversation with them and see. I think the kids will be able to see, within the first 5 minutes if they can have a conversation with them or not.
Yes.
Kids can, I mean, teens especially could feel the vibes, you know.
What would you say? Let's say, let's talk to a different part of the audience because this show is for teens and primarily we talk to teens, but there's times
Mhm.
where we talk to the adults involved with teens as well, which is
Right.
something I say in the podcast description. What do you say to these older white folks that can't relate to, you know, our black and brown students, but they want to? What do you say to them?
They want to, but they just can't.
They don't
I
know they
would,
don't know what to do or how to because they didn't grow up the same way. They haven't had to
yeah,
deal with being black in America. They haven't had
right,
to deal with being Hispanic in America. They
right.
don't know what that's like, but they want to be helpful. And
Hmm.
I know a lot of people who are like that, and that's why I ask because I know there's a lot out there like that, more than we realize.
Well, we had a group that we started in our school to kind of bridge that gap. And I feel like it helped a lot because we had games and icebreakers so that the teenage boys could be a little bit more closer to some of the male faculty who happen to be white and a little bit out of touch. So we felt like it would be a nice opportunity for them to bond and get to know each other. And I feel like that's the way to start it, get some conversations going and for them to have an open mind and hear what these kids are actually going through, and that way they can even though they never been through it or don't understand it, they can start to create a dialogue with them, and that'll create a bond and then eventually hopefully trust so that they could be somebody that they could feel comfortable going to talk to.
So in other words, what I hear is find a way to get them to see that you're relatable.
Hmm.
And even
Yeah.
if you didn't grow up in the same city in the same way, you can be
Right.
relatable.
Right. Like, I feel like a lot of people want to know if you're relatable because I've had women, right, that will say to me, "Oh, you look really young. I don't know if I can relate to you or if you can relate to me." And I said, "Well, give it a try and see." And then I get a lot of women who ask me right off the bat, "Are you a mother?" And when I first started as a clinician, I would say, "Yeah, I have a daughter." And then as I got older, I would say, "Why?" Like, why would you want to know? Because, and I ask them and they say, "Well, I just want to know if you can relate to the struggles that I'm going through as being a mother." And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, okay. I do
Right.
understand now, but just because let's say I didn't have a kid at the time and I was still doing therapy, I would still be able to relate, but it would be harder for them to accept the fact that I could relate or even give me a chance to relate with certain people because they want to know that you have that common bond at
Mm-hmm.
first. So you have to like connect on some level, you know.
And sometimes I think to add to that, kind of still answering the same question I just asked, it really is about relatability. Um, I used to work at Job Corps, and I've talked about that before. And
Mhm.
something that I did see with some of the teachers there, and when I worked at the Job Corps, the particular one I worked at, um, almost all of the staff in the education wing were white, and
Wow.
almost 80% of the student population was black and brown.
Right.
And that did pose as a problem sometimes. But I also saw teachers that did not grow up in some of the neighborhoods that some of these kids grew up, but they were still able to relate to them. Now they had
Mhm.
to work at it a little bit to get the students to see that. And I
Right.
think, and again, talking to teachers and administrators and counselors, guidance counselors, any position that you're in the school system and you're dealing with teens, I think it's important to point that out. You can find a way to relate, but be honest about it. Just say,
Yeah.
no, I don't know what it's like to be black and be judged everywhere I go. I don't know what that's like, but I know what it's
Right.
like to be poor. I know what it's
Mhm.
like to be different than people. I know what it's like to be made fun of. I know what it's
Right.
like to be whatever, you know, whatever their
Right.
situation is, or for people to assume that you have money, that you're this and that, because that's
Right.
an issue too.
Mhm.
Um,
Sometimes I've noticed with the talking to teens, sometimes they associate just being white with having money, and that's not always the case.
Oh my God, that's so not the case.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that segues into what I was about to say actually.
Mhm.
Sometimes I have seen people, they just like look like an average white suburban person, but they grew up poor. I mean,
Yeah.
po. They couldn't even afford the other OR. Po, po, po. And so when it comes to poverty, color really sits in the background. And you
Yeah.
don't know that unless you start working with enough people to see it. I will say
Yes.
that's something I learned at Job Corps. Whether
Definitely.
they're white and they live out in the sticks, or
Mhm.
they're black or brown and they live in the inner city, the mentalities are very very close
Yes.
when it comes to poverty thinking. And that's just an example because poverty is not the only way, but
Right.
that's the first one that comes to mind. And it's like there are more ways to relate. So find those ways. Don't try to
Mhm.
pretend.
Right.
Be
Definitely don't
honest
try
and
to
real.
pretend because they could tell
No. Oh
in
my
two
God, yeah.
seconds. Like, oh my
Yeah.
God, he's so fake. She's so fake. I'm
And you
not
don't
fucking with
have
him.
to, and you don't, and here's the thing for the adults listening, you don't have to fake it. You don't
You
have to
don't.
fake relating. There is something you can relate. You might have to discover what that is,
Right.
which means you might need to get to know your students better and find out
Exactly.
what you identify with and relate on that level. Because I could promise you, I don't care where you grew up and what you grew up with, you can find a way to relate to somebody.
Yeah.
You can find a
Definitely.
way to
It
relate,
might take a
but you
little
have to want
time.
to.
Yeah, it might take a little homework, but that's okay. That's how we learn each other.
And for the students listening who are black, or for the students, the teens who are listening who are black
Mhm.
and brown, if someone's trying, meet them halfway.
Yeah.
Maybe you might want a black counselor, but you ain't got one. Okay,
Right.
so
So you
that
have
is
to deal
not
with
what you
what you
have.
have.
You got to deal with
Yeah.
what you have, and if there's someone around you who's willing to meet you halfway and try,
Yeah.
I would say you should try too, because that's the only way we can come together and solve problems.
Right.
Ideally, I would love for there to be a black counselor in every school in America, but that's not real right
Right.
now. When that
Right.
becomes real, I will celebrate. I'll
Right.
do backflips and
Backflips.
everything.
And one that
But
speaks Spanish too, cause that's a huge need as
yes,
well. Yeah.
yes, yes, very much so.
Yep.
Yeah, very much so. All right. So I knew I was just gonna love this conversation. Now, why do you think that teens need to get therapized?
Oh, they need to get therapized because they are young adults at the threshold of becoming adults. And
Mhm.
if they get their therapization right around that time, they will most likely, can't say all, but most likely be able to transition into adulthood without a lot of the childhood trauma that plagues us all in certain ways as adults who have not been therapized. So
Yes.
you get childhood trauma and that obviously goes with you into teenhood, and then if you don't get therapy, then it goes with you into adulthood, and then your relationships with adults and whatever you decide to do in life, everything will be difficult because you never healed that inner childhood trauma that you experienced. But I think that that range from 13 to 18, to focus on that target audience to get their therapy at that time, I think it will have a smoother transition for them going into adulthood for sure.
What if they don't have any childhood trauma, or at least they think they don't?
Mm, interesting. I don't think anybody makes it out of life without trauma, but childhood trauma, I don't think I've met anybody who's never had any sort of childhood trauma. I would like to meet them. Maybe they don't. Maybe they
They
don't, like you said,
no,
they don't
no, no,
know.
listen, listen, they do exist. All we have to do is close our eyes and they will appear because they're not real.
I was about to say, like, is this a trick question?
Well, I
We
do
all been
those sometimes.
traumatized, right? We all been
Well,
traumatized
we
at
all
one
have our
point, yeah.
issues. I always like to say
Mhm.
we all have our issues, just different ones.
Yeah,
And
different.
the truth is, whatever issues you're avoiding and not dealing with, they are already dealing with you because they go through you.
Yes.
They go with you to at your job. They go with you into your next relationship, and you're
Yeah,
wondering why you keep picking the same dummies over and over again because you ain't dealt with the reason you picking them dummies in the first place. Or they go with
exactly.
you with your job, and you keep getting fired all the time because you haven't dealt with the issue that's causing you to do the thing that gets you fired all the time.
Exactly.
It's like we all have our different issues. They
Mhm.
manifest different ways with all of us,
Right.
but deal with it now so you can get it over with and move on and be healthier. Like
The
that's
earlier
my
you do it, the
attitude.
better. Yeah,
Yeah, there's some things that I
because
had wished I had dealt with when I was younger that I didn't deal with
yeah.
till I was an adult because I didn't have that understanding back then. You know.
Mhm. Yeah, it's amazing when you can realize like your own personal growth and you're like, "Oh, I would have handled this different and I didn't accept it at this time, but now I'm ready to receive it." You know?
Yes, yes. So that's so important.
Mhm.
Let's talk about the stigma around therapy. Does that still exist?
Oh, very much so. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I've dealt with many different cultures when it comes to therapy, and I've had people just say to me, "Oh, my family is from, let's pick a random country, El Salvador, right?
Mm-hmm.
They my father's from El Salvador. He doesn't believe in therapy." I've had Italians say, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
my father doesn't believe in therapy." Muslims, Black Caribbean men. My
Yep.
father does not believe in therapy, and it's funny because they say with each culture, but it's like it's a culture across the board. Doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
what nationality or ethnicity you're from. A lot of people feel like therapy means that you're automatically crazy or
Yeah.
that you can't handle your life and you need to talk to somebody else or you're telling your business to a stranger, you know? So the stigma is still very alive and well. I think that society is beginning to accept it more and that mental health is becoming like more that people are becoming more aware of it and accepting it more. But I do think the stigma is still very strong and alive.
I agree. What are some ways that we could help to get rid of the stigma?
Normalizing therapy and having honest conversations about therapy. What we doing right now? We helping right now.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's not.
Right?
I wasn't
Yeah.
looking for that praise, but it's true, and
Yeah.
it's something that we're going to talk about on the show quite a bit.
Yeah.
Um, something I've already talked about in many of the episodes is therapy, and the fact that it's healthy and it's good. It's just a matter of finding the right kind,
Right.
right?
And somebody that
So
meshes with you and you can be like,
yes.
okay, be honest and open and really show up as yourself in therapy because otherwise you're not going to get the full benefits of therapy if you're in there faking and acting like somebody you're not, you know?
Oh my God, yeah. And I know for me, if when it comes to therapists, I do need that relatability.
Mhm.
For me, I if you just talk about ideals and you don't understand anything I'm going through or dealing with, and you talk about it only as concepts, I've already left the room before you did. Like I'm
Yeah.
done.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not talking to you because you can't help me.
You
You just
can't
talking
help
about
me.
ideas. I want some
Exactly.
practical, real. You can help me get some insight, and then give me some
Exactly.
practicality, some reality. And you could be an old white man and do that. It
Right.
doesn't. That's not what matters to me. What matters is to me is that I can be honest and real with you, and that's so important. And so if you're listening, every therapist isn't going to be for you, and that's okay. If you found a
Right.
therapist who lives out in cuckoo land and doesn't relate to you at all, move on and find another one. It's really okay. And there's so many
Right.
online versions now that you can, there's so many ways of getting therapy online, is the way I meant to say it, that you
Right.
don't have to necessarily stick with what's in your little small town, if
That's
you're, or
true.
what's at your school. If you have health insurance, you can probably get therapy.
Right.
What would you say to a young black girl, for example, who only has out of touch white people around her to go to?
Out of touch white people to go to. For a black girl?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Now
Oh,
you could
Lord.
have, now you let me also say you could have some out of touch black folks in positions too. So
That's
it's
true.
not just about the race, but it's about um, what would you say to someone who's only got out of touch people around them?
I would tell them that they gotta talk to them and try to bring them up to date and bring them up to speed. Like, try to engage them in a conversation and then try to let them know, like, what the issues are for her demographic, age-wise, race, and kinda, like, explain to them that the struggles of her, like, individual and as a group, um, of people, not necessarily, just her as an individual, but like other black people who might be attending the school as well. Maybe she could get some of them together and have like a meeting where she could explain that they need more support from the school, and get some people on board who might be out of touch, but like kind of bring them up to speed a little bit. Tell them about the new lingo, about the issues, style, all kinds of things that they could connect on.
What what if, okay, let's say they try that. And what if they still feel like, "Oh my god, this woman don't have a clue. This man don't have a clue. I cannot talk to them. They don't get it." Where
Mm.
do they go?
They would have to call me.
Ding ding ding. No,
Ding,
actually
ding, ding.
they really would. So, um Erica is a licensed therapist, as I mentioned in the beginning of this episode. But she also does online therapy. And that's why I mentioned that a few moments ago. If you're looking for somebody to relate to, I can tell you myself, she's very down to earth. You can keep it real. You can say whatever you want. She will listen. She will laugh with you. She just, she will listen. She'll be there for you. But
Great.
even if you can't go to Erica, there are other online options. If you can't find anybody in your town or your city or somewhere near you, and
Right.
I'm saying that because I don't want you to sit there and not get the help you need because there's nobody relatable around you. And I know that stops a lot of people. It genuinely does. And as far as the stigma goes, I did want to speak to that too. That stigma I know is still there,
Mhm.
but keep in mind, a lot of people who talk that talk about not needing therapy, you could see their issues. Do you want that to be you too? I just wanted to
Definitely
plant
not.
that seed
Yeah,
in some of your heads. Do
that's
you want
right.
that to be you too? They might be great people, they might be nice, they might be caring, but you could see how messed up they are when
Yeah.
it comes to certain things. Do you
Mhm.
want to be that too? Sometimes you
Exactly.
just need somebody, and sometimes a therapist isn't necessarily about. Um, so a therapist isn't necessarily always going to be just let's dig up everything in your past and talk about everything that was the most hurtful ever, and that's all where we're going to stay. Because sometimes people think that that's what therapy is,
Right. No,
and
it's growth.
there is some of that, but there's
Right.
not, but it's not about staying there. It's about
Right.
being, dealing with it and coming out of it, correct?
Right. Correct. And using coping skills to maintain it.
Yes, I teach when
Mhm.
I as a coach, I'm not a therapist, but as I always like to say, but I do therapize.
You do
so
therapy.
so so there's times where I'm giving people coping mechanisms for the issues that are getting in their way, but then I will send them to a therapist to take a deeper dive.
Right.
And the truth is you need a little bit of both. Um
Right. That coaching for that motivation and then the therapy for processing the trauma and getting over that trauma and learning how to deal with it and not messing up the relationships that you have to cultivate as an adult.
yes, big
Mhm.
time.
Yep, it goes
Now,
hand in hand.
what would you say to the adults who are
Mhm.
listening right now? And I'm going to be very particular. The adults who are listening right now that I said something to them earlier from myself, but I would like something to come from you. What would you say to the adults who are listening who do work in the school systems? They got like three black people in the school. So it's
Mm,
an all white system, and you know, they want to be able to reach out to them and they want to be able to help them. They don't know how.
hmm. I would say that, wait, the adults in the school, you mean?
Yes, the adults
To
who are
reach out.
in our school systems, and I'm speaking in very general terms
Okay.
across the nation, because we always have these quote unquote systems that are typically made for one type of student, and they're
Right.
not always. Now, that's not true for every single person in the nation. There are
Right.
people that have a clue and they've made some changes, but
Mhm.
overwhelmingly, we still have a lot of traditional settings in a lot of our school systems in America, which
Right.
exclude a good portion of the population.
Right.
So what would you say to them? What could they do to make their systems better?
To be more inclusive, have like a parents' night where the parents come too and they get involved and meet the faculty and maybe try to bridge the gap between uh them not knowing the community that they're serving and just kind of get familiarized with it.
I'm going to add on to that. I agree.
Mhm.
I think one of the biggest, biggest pieces to that is how you come across. If you come
Mhm.
across as condescending, you've already killed everything you're trying to do.
Yeah,
If you come
especially if
across
talking to a
as
lady.
you people or those folks,
Oh gosh, forget it.
and I am not just talking about race, I mean in any kind of way, you
Yeah.
people mentality,
Yeah.
it will kill
In a
any
second.
opportunity for anybody to take you serious.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true.
And I just wanted to add that piece there because that's just like so
Mhm.
critical. All right, well, our it's I really want to keep talking, but we're gonna talk more episodes. And by the way, you're going to hear a lot more from Erica. She's going to be on a few upcoming episodes. As a therapist who's worked with teens, we're going to talk about a lot of different things. Some of those episodes will actually include teens as well.
Yes.
Now, Erica, you own Empower Therapy. So
Yes.
you do online therapy sessions with people?
Yes, online therapy sessions. Hope to one day maybe do some in person as well, but for now I'm online, doing sessions, either
Hmm.
individuals sessions or a couple of groups too. I'm thinking about some trauma groups for older women and also trauma groups for teen resiliency.
Awesome. So how can
Yeah.
people find you?
Theempoweredtherapy.com is the name of the website.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on today, Erica Bess. It has been awesome talking
Thank
to you.
you. Thank you for
And I
having
hope,
me, Miss
oh,
Fatima.
no problem. I really hope that some of the listeners really got some really big nuggets to think about today and that they
Definitely.
turn those seeds that were sown today into some fruit tomorrow.
Definitely. And you're always doing that. And I think that you're a huge inspiration to the community and girls who will see you and be inspired by you. Because I'm inspired
Oh,
by you myself.
oh, thank you.
You're
I certainly hope
welcome.
so.
Yes, ma'am.
And now for a mind shifting moment. I want to plant a thought seed in your head today. We can go on and on talking about the problems all day long. We could be here for a whole week talking about the problems in our school systems, the problems when you're a person of color within our school systems. But let's take a step back and focus on the solution. Where there's a will, there's a way. And if the solutions that you seek are not around you, find them. If you are one of the teenagers we're talking about in this episode, find your solution and don't stop seeking it until you find it. Find that person you can talk to because there's plenty of us around that actually care and you can talk to. You just have to find us. And if you're one of the school administrators or teacher or staff that we're talking about, you too can find a solution. You can find a way to reach those who need to be reached if you really want to. Just try. I want to I want you all to take a moment and think differently. Shift your thinking towards solutions instead of just focusing on the problems. That's the bigger picture I want you to get out of today. Thank you for listening to Mindshift Power Podcast. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel at The Mindshifter. If you have any comments, topic suggestions, or would like to be a guest on the show, please visit fatimabay.com/podcast. Remember, there's power in shifting your thinking. Tune in for next week.